The night cracked open like a thunderclap the moment the billionaire reached for the single dad's arm, eyes glittering with desperation beneath a chandelier heavy with gold and secrets, and made a request that would freeze the room, tilt destinies, and quietly rewrite two broken lives forever. In that instant, surrounded by tuxedos, diamonds, and whispering power, a man who measured his days in school lunches and overdue bills stepped into a world where one favor could cost everything, or heal what money never could. Before the story pulls you deeper, pause for a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and ordinary people rising in extraordinary moments, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach hearts around the world. He had come to the gala because the catering company needed an extra pair of hands and because the overtime meant his daughter's asthma medicine would be covered for another month. His suit was borrowed, his shoes polished with care that hid their age, and his hands carried the faint scent of dish soap no matter how often he washed them. He moved through the ballroom like a shadow, steady and invisible, learning long ago that survival sometimes meant not being seen. The billionaire, on the other hand, was impossible to miss. She carried her wealth like armor and her loneliness like a secret bruise, her life a series of polished headlines masking a storm of scrutiny, betrayals, and a recent scandal that threatened to swallow her empire. Tonight was supposed to be her redemption in public view, a performance of stability for investors who had begun to circle like sharks. The trouble was that stability had abandoned her days earlier. The fiancé whose name still clung to her wrist in the form of a watch had vanished from her life and the tabloids had sharpened their knives. She needed proof of calm, proof of control, proof that she was not unraveling. When her eyes landed on the single dad, tall enough, gentle enough, worn enough to look real, she made a choice that felt reckless and strangely right. She asked him to stand beside her as a husband for a night, to borrow his ordinariness as a shield against the storm. He understood the risk instantly. Men like him did not pretend to be husbands to billionaires. Men like him were replaced, forgotten, and blamed. Yet something in her face, fear stripped of polish, mirrored his own on nights when his daughter's breathing grew shallow. He agreed, not because he wanted the world she lived in, but because he recognized a human being cornered by expectations. The room shifted. Eyes followed. Whispers thickened the air. He felt every step as if it were a test he had not studied for, yet he stood with a quiet steadiness learned from bedtime stories told during power outages and mornings stitched together by hope. As cameras flashed, he kept his posture calm, his presence unassuming, a grounding force that surprised even him. The billionaire, used to being the strongest person in every room, leaned into that calm and found something unfamiliar, relief. As the night wore on, the act became less about convincing others and more about surviving the moment. He noticed how she flinched when laughter turned sharp, how her smile tightened when business rivals approached. She noticed how he listened without performing, how he noticed the staff by name, how he treated the space as borrowed and precious rather than owned. In a world that had demanded she be untouchable, his normalcy felt like a handrail. In a life that had demanded he be resilient without reward, her trust felt like a recognition he had not known he needed. The consequences arrived swiftly. By morning, the story had escaped the ballroom and sprinted into headlines. Analysts speculated. Rivals sneered. The catering company panicked. He was suspended pending review, a polite phrase that meant bills would pile up again. She faced boardroom fury and legal threats, her reputation now tethered to a man whose name they could barely pronounce. Yet something unexpected happened. Investors calmed. The market steadied. The public, exhausted by curated perfection, responded to the authenticity of a woman daring to appear human and a man brave enough to stand beside her. He returned home to his small apartment and his daughter's soft sleep, unsure if he had saved himself or ruined everything. She sat alone in a penthouse that felt colder than it had ever been, realizing that for the first time in years, she did not feel alone. The days that followed were not easy. There were contracts to untangle, apologies to issue, and lines to draw. But there were also quiet moments where help arrived without cameras, where she ensured his job was restored without strings, where a fund quietly covered his daughter's medical needs because compassion did not need a press release. The world wanted a fairy tale or a scandal. What it received instead was a lesson. Strength could look like borrowed shoes and a steady heart. Wealth could bow to dignity without losing its shine. The single dad did not become rich overnight, but he became visible in a way that mattered. The billionaire did not lose her power, she redefined it. Both learned that pretending for one night could reveal truths a lifetime of posturing had hidden. If this story has begun to stir something in you, take a second to comment below with the word kindness so we know these stories are finding the right hearts. Near the end of that chapter, as attention moved on and the ballroom returned to silence, the memory that remained was not the spectacle but the choice. A choice to see another person fully, without transaction. A choice to stand steady when fear demanded retreat. The single dad went back to his routines with a lighter step, teaching his daughter that courage could be quiet. The billionaire returned to her boardroom with a softer voice, proving that leadership could listen. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe so you never miss a reminder that humanity still matters. And just before you go, leave a comment about the moment that moved you most, because your voice helps keep stories like this alive.